The morning of December 17, 2010, dawned like any other in the small Tunisian town of Sidi Bouzid. The streets were quiet, lined with faded shopfronts and crumbling buildings, a place where hope seemed like a distant memory. The air was cool, carrying the scent of dust and exhaust from battered cars rattling down the road. It was here, in this overlooked town, that a 26-year-old fruit seller named Mohamed Bouazizi began his day, just as he always had, pushing his worn wooden cart through the streets. To the world, he was invisible. But Bouazizi was a man carrying the silent weight of generations, burdened by poverty, unemployment, and a system that crushed ambition before it could breathe. Tunisia in 2010 was a country simmering with quiet anger. Jobs were scarce, corruption was rampant, and dignity felt like a luxury reserved for the powerful. For Bouazizi, selling fruit was not just survival. It was an act of defiance, a way to carve out a shred of independence. But every day brought humiliation. Police officers, armed with authority but lacking compassion, harassed him relentlessly. Permits were demanded, bribes were expected, and even his meager earnings were at the mercy of their whims. Bouaziz's life was a cycle of struggle, and yet he endured. He smiled through the hardship, carrying home bread for his widowed mother and younger siblings. On that fateful morning, however, something snapped. A municipal officer confronted him once more, demanding his cart and confiscating his scales, the tools of his trade, his lifeline. When he protested, she allegedly slapped him across the face in public, a blow that struck deeper than skin. In that moment, Bouaziz's humiliation became unbearable. The young man who had been invisible for so long suddenly saw only one way to make himself heard. With the eyes of his town upon him, Bouazizi walked to the steps of the local governor's office. His heart pounded with rage and despair as he doused himself in gasoline. People stopped in their tracks, horrified, sensing something irreversible. Without a word, Bouazizi lit a match, and in a flash, his body was engulfed in flames. Screams filled the air, chaos erupted, but it was too late. In that act of unimaginable pain, Bouaziz's protest became a cry not just for himself, but for every Tunisian crushed under the weight of corruption and hopelessness. The news spread like wildfire, first through whispers in Sidi Bouzid, then across Tunisia, and soon across the entire Arab world. Images of Bouaziz's charred body circulated online, shared by young Tunisians who had long been silenced. His suffering exposed a reality too many already knew. People were suffocating under regimes that robbed them not only of opportunity but of dignity. Bouazizi lay in a hospital bed for 18 days, covered in burns, his body failing even as his story ignited a movement. Crowds began gathering in Sidi Bouzid, chanting his name. His act of despair had awakened something powerful, a collective refusal to remain silent. Tunisia, long seen as a quiet dictatorship, was about to become the epicenter of a storm. By January 4, 2011, Mohamed Bouaziz's body could no longer endure the agony. He passed away at the age of 26, and with his death, the simmering discontent of a nation erupted into fury. In Sidi Bouzid, thousands poured into the streets, carrying his image, chanting for justice. "We are all Mohamed Bouazizi," they cried, their voices echoing across Tunisia. What began as a local outcry soon engulfed the entire country. For years, Tunisians had lived under the rule of Zaini El Abidine Ben Ali, a dictator whose regime thrived on fear, censorship, and corruption. But Bouaziz's story cut through that fear like a blade. Videos of protests, shot on cheap cell phones, flooded social media platforms, like Facebook and Twitter. Suddenly, the world was watching. Ordinary people, armed only with courage and determination, faced riot police and tear gas. The government responded with violence, but the protests only grew. Within days, Tunisia became a nation on the brink of revolution. Bouaziz's funeral drew thousands, and his name became a rallying cry for freedom. Protesters demanded jobs, dignity, and an end to authoritarian rule. On January 14th, just 10 days after Bouaziz's passing, Ben Ali fled the country, ending 23 years of iron-fisted rule. Tunisia had accomplished the unthinkable. A grassroots uprising had toppled a dictator, but the story didn't stop at Tunisia's borders. Bouaziz's act of protest became a spark that ignited the Arab Spring, a wave of revolutions and uprisings across the Middle East and North Africa. From Egypt's Tahrir Square to Libya, Yemen, Syria, and beyond, millions took to the streets, inspired by a humble fruit seller's defiance. The images of Bouaziz's flames haunted regimes and emboldened ordinary people, proving that even the powerless could shake the foundations of power. The aftermath was complicated and often tragic. Some countries found hope, others spiraled into chaos. In Syria, the protests became a brutal civil war. In Egypt, fleeting democracy gave way to renewed authoritarianism. Yet Bouaziz's name remained a symbol, a reminder that dignity is worth fighting for. His sacrifice was not just a personal tragedy. It was a turning point in history. Today, over a decade later, his story still resonates. Bouazizi was not a politician or an activist. He was a young man selling fruit, struggling to survive, humiliated one too many times, and yet his desperate act became the voice of millions. He forced the world to confront the pain of a region long ignored. The lesson of Mohamed Bouazizi is both heartbreaking and powerful. One person's suffering can awaken the conscience of an entire generation. His flames burned more than his own body. They burned through fear, silence, and oppression, leaving behind a truth that still flickers in the hearts of those fighting for justice.